in slightly over a year, Kenya will be heading to the polls. This means a season of high-octane politics, vicious political competition and voter mobilization as politicians battle it out for various seats. The country is already in an electioneering and campaign mood. At the center of this, however, are concerns of disunity and ethnic mobilization likely to drive divisions and spur violence, as has been witnessed in recent by-elections. On this episode of The Front Row, we interrogate Kenya's policies around this and whether indeed they are serving their purpose. Is Kenya winning in its efforts to halt ethnic and class incitement, hate speech and discrimination? Are we on the path to national cohesion? We'll be attempting to answer to some of these questions. But also we are engaging you via our Twitter poll question, and we're asking you, do you think Kenya is winning in its efforts to halt ethnic and class incitement, hate speech and discrimination? Do you think Kenya is winning in its efforts to halt ethnic and class incitement, hate speech and discrimination? Do you use the hashtag FrontRow at Akisa Wandera, at KTN News KE? Would be glad to engage with you. So let's see who are our panelists for this conversation. I'll be speaking to Judith Pareno, who's a nominated senator. She's a member of ODM, and she was elected as a member of parliament to the East African Legislative Assembly from 2012 to 2017. A lawyer by profession, she's the proprietor of J.N. Pareno and Company Advocates, and she'll be talking to us about a bill she's sponsoring at the Senate that also looks at how to strengthen not just the NCIC, but also the policies and laws around this. We also have Mugambi Kiai, who's the regional director for the Article 19 East Africa. Mugambi is a distinguished human rights lawyer with close to 3 decades of expertise in different capacities in the areas of rule of law, justice, governance, democracy and human rights, including freedom of expression and media freedom issues. Again, Article 19 also has done a lot of work around this. And specifically, very interesting, would love to hear his thoughts on hate speech versus freedom of expression. And finally, we have Commissioner Wamboi Nyoto, who's the Vice Chairperson of the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. She's a certified professional mediator and Mediation Training Institute, East Africa, and she also holds an arbitration and ADR certification coming from the NCIC. We'd love to hear what the Commission is doing. They just recently launched their 5-year strategic plan, and specifically aimed at curbing hate speech and violence and discrimination in 2022. That's just about a year to come. So these are some of the issues we will be conversing on this episode of The Front Row. But before that, let's begin by revisiting this story done earlier this year when the National Cohesion and Integration Commission cracked the whip on some politicians over hate speech.
After being criticized for being a toothless dog, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, NCIC, has finally cracked the whip. The Commission has begun listing people engaging in hate speech and warmongering every month. And in its inaugural list of shame, 3 MPs and former Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko are listed.
We have the name of Mr. Johanna Ngeno and Mr. Mike Sonko, Honorable Arati, and Honorable Osoros.
The fist fight witnessed earlier this week between Dagoretti North lawmaker Simba Arati and South Mugirango's Silvana Osoro, ostensibly making them debutants in the new list. Johanna Ngeno of Mrua Dikir, who has an active incitement case in court, has also been arrested 3 times before for allegedly fomenting violence. Similarly, the former flashy Nairobi Governor Mike Mbovi Sonko, who is currently embroiled in multiple legal suits, was also named. Sonko has found himself in trouble over statements he has been making both in public and on his social media platforms that have been termed as inflammatory.
And we are working with other agencies to make sure that this person will not be eligible to be elected to a position, whether it's MCA, MP, senator, governor, whatever.
However, others were lauded for their behavior, making it to the list of fame.
Mr. Mohammed Abdulkahim Osman, MP for Fapfi, and Mrs. Charity Gadambi, MP of Joro. Those are two names we have put in the list of fame.
The National Assembly National Security Committee also saying that it will take stern action on those who would cross the line as far as national security is concerned.
The leaders who are entertaining a class clash, we want to tell them, we will summon you.
The move has since sparked a ton of reactions from the public and legislators alike.
Watu wanaongea vibaya zaidi Kenya hii, kama akina Sifuna, akina nani, wanaandika anything they want. MCA jana mwingine alikuwa kwa mkutano ya Raila, akaongea vitu ya maajabu. Na mnaangalia mnasema ati nyinyi kuna Kenya A na kuna Kenya B.
NCIC will now be publishing a list of shame and fame every month until the year 2022 in a bid to contain the rising political temperatures in the country. Emmanuel To, KTN News, Nairobi.
And just before we get to that conversation, remember we're asking you whether you think Kenya is winning in its efforts to halt ethnic and class incitement, hate speech and discrimination. Send your answers to @Akisa at KTN News KE. The hashtag to use is the front row. Our text line is also open on 22155. Remember, you can also send in your questions to our panelists. I'll be glad to pose them for you on anything pertaining the issue we're discussing on the show. So then let's begin with you, Wamboi Nyutu, and I'll just pick it up from that story our reporter Emmanuel To has done on publishing the list of shame. How is this working so far?
First of all, thank you very much and a very good evening to you, Krista. Thank you for finding time to invite us to your studio tonight. I also say hello to the two other panelists and especially to Senator Pareno, who is pushing out our bill and trying to assist NCIC to achieve things or its mandate. The issue of naming and shaming was introduced just a few months ago. And the reason as to why we introduced the issue of naming and shaming politicians or persons who are fanning ethnic hatred, ethnic contempt, fanning violence, discriminating against others, or trying to divide Kenyans against along ethnic lines, was because we realized that there must be more to what we do. It's good to show the world that indeed we note that these people are doing the wrong things and that we note that they should not be leaders, because a leader should be elected to lead the people. A leader should be elected to unite Kenyans, not to divide Kenyans along any other lines. So the wall of shame and fame is meant to show Kenyans how their leaders are faring. And I can say we are doing very well. Actually, when we meet the MPs outside there, they tell us, Wamboi, I really hope that I'll not find myself in your wall of shame. So they are trying, to get off the wall of shame. And even the ones who are put on the wall of shame, they kept calling our chairman and pestering him and telling him, why did you put me on the wall of shame? It's because they are ashamed and they feel that they have failed Kenyans. So it's an important thing to remind people, to remind leaders of their duties, because some at some point do forget them.
Has it in any way deterred the politicians? We can see the by-election currently in Kiambaa. The election is supposed to be held on Thursday. We can see the situation there, and we've seen some of the utterances made there. Would you say this has in any way deterred politicians from hate speech, discrimination, and making utterances that NCIC frowns upon?
I can say it has deterred politicians because in a way people are also afraid, because you remember that we are not only publishing politicians in the wall of fame and shame, we are also recommending to the EACC so that they will not be viable to run in the 2022 general election. So when you get to the wall of shame, we are also running a report with the EACC, which is supposed to be clearing our leaders on the issue of Chapter 6 of the Constitution of Kenya. And we are going to be telling EACC that this particular leader does not meet the threshold of Chapter 6 of the Constitution. They do not have the values to lead Kenyans. They are not viable to vie. So this unity or this working relationship that we have established with the EACC is also going to assist us. So apart from shaming them and deterring them, we will also be blocking them from running. And I think this will be the much needed solution to the hate speech, to the division, and to the incitement that we have always seen.
Hearing how Kenyans feel about the wall of fame and shame, Honorable Judith Pareno, you've come up with a bill that is in its first reading at the Senate, and it is seeking the National Cohesion and Peace Building Bill of 2021, seeking to strengthen the NCIC, perhaps restructure it. Where are you coming from with this, and what are you seeking with this bill?
I thank you, Akisa, for giving me this opportunity to come and explain and expound on how this bill came to be and why are we where we are today. I would first refer you to the provisions of our Constitution. It is from the Constitution that we draw most of these responsibilities as legislators. So if you could I could quickly refer to Article 10 of the Constitution of Kenya. You will allow me to just quickly go through the provisions. And it talks about national values and principles of governance. That the national values and principles of governance in the article bind all state organs, state officers, public service officers, and persons whenever any of them applies or interprets this constitution, enacts, applies, or interprets a law, but specifically talks of the national values and principles to include patriotism, national unity, which this bill is really about, sharing and devolution of power, the rule of law, democracy, and participation of the people. Then it goes ahead to talk about human dignity, equity, because this is one of the things that bring division, social justice, inclusiveness, equality, human rights, non-discrimination, and protection of the marginalized. Then you go to Article 232 that talks about peace in this country, cohesion in this country, and how we should all be bound together by upholding this very principle. So this bill, we started this bill with the National Cohesion and Integration Committee. We had an engagement as a committee. I sit in the Committee of National Cohesion and Integration. And when we had these engagements, we realized that I actually felt their frustrations, especially the Commission. The Commission, on one hand, has a mandate, but that mandate is shared with a department of another ministry. The budget is shared, so they are not as capacitated as they should be, and they are unable to perform. So at the end of the day, we came up with this bill because there are so many shortcomings that they are not able to talk about, or they are not able to articulate, because of the division that we have, the structure that we have of what we are doing. You can imagine issues of peace building being under a department in the office of the president, and then you have the national cohesion, a whole commission created by our own constitution, handling only issues on cohesion. So we felt there is need for a structure that brings together all these efforts, so that when we talk of cohesion, we are talking about stability, we are talking about unity, we are talking about reconciliation, but all in one structure and in a coordinated manner. So because of this, because of the provisions of the Constitution and the gaps that came about when we discussed the mandate of the national NCIC, then we felt that this law was going to bring in a new structure that will actually abolish the current NCIC and bring in what we are calling a commission that will deal with not just national cohesion as it is now, but will also deal with peace building. So you bring all of them together under one umbrella.
Mugambi, listening to what Wamboi has said, some of the strategies they're coming up with to try and deal with this, and the bill that Honorable Pareno is sponsoring at the Senate, and then juxtaposing it with everything that is happening in our political field and beyond, are we getting it right as a country in terms of heading towards national cohesion? Are our policies right?
I'm afraid, Wakisa, I'm afraid that unfortunately, what is called a war against hate speech. There's no war going on against hate speech, as far as I'm concerned. And for several reasons. I totally feel for the NCIC. They're under-personed, they're under-resourced, and you don't take a penknife to a gunfight. And that's what they have in terms of legislation. So let me start at the very beginning. Let me circle back. The legislation, actually, around hate speech is an exception to the freedom of expression. So the original principle is one of human rights, freedom of expression. So this is an exception, and when you do exceptions to a human right, there are principles you apply. In this case, they're called the Syracuse principles. And the main ones are around legitimacy, legality, proportionality. Now, what we find with hate speech is the legislation that we have is inelegant. It is too broad. It can be interpreted any which way. So that's one key issue. The other one, of course, is a trust deficit. Those enforcing the law, I think you had some legislators talking about a Kenya A and a Kenya B. So it seems that hate speech can be weaponized depending on who is seen as a political opponent. So that's a huge, huge issue. I think the third issue around hate speech is that hate speech does not, I will not say go and get a kissa because she comes from Western Kenya. I will say madoadoa, which, is a dog whistle.
It's a connotation already.
It's a dog whistle. So how is a court supposed to grab that? So whole questions around building a corpus of information around dog whistles that then say, if you say something, so in the West, it's very easy to say the N-word in the US. It's clear, it's got a history. In Kenya, we're still building that corpus. Also remember that our struggles for this constitution were against authoritarianism. So the whole question around, is this going to be a tool to be used by those in power against those who are trying to get power or are criticizing them legitimately in that sense of shutting up your opponents? So these are some of the questions that I think, as we look at Senator Pareno's very admirable effort, I think we need to put all of this in the table. And unfortunately, again, because we're going to an election, we're going to do this in a hurry. And that's the problem I have. I have a problem where when we're about to start a race, this is when people are doing a whole engine overhaul. Remember that with hate speech, at least as far as you know now, it's the police, for example, who are, with the NCIC, that collaboration has never really been smooth. Yet the police, as we can see, are now being tagged as having a dog in the fight in terms of the political competition. That's a big problem. So what actually comes out is that you don't have a war against hate speech. Is that you're trying to muzzle the opposition, for example, or you're trying to muzzle your opponent. And yet, for real, if we did a good job, if you actually look at some of the studies and some of the experiences, you can get hate speech. I shudder to look at Rwanda, but they tried something there that, for now, we can say succeeded, because they also had dog whistles, Inyenze, right? But even for them, they have that problem now in terms of being told that what has happened is that with the government there, they're muzzling the opposition. So, I think my summary is as follows. That it's good. I think that Senator Pareno has brought us back to the drawing board. But I see we still have too much chalk dust. We need to put everything down and ask ourselves, first of all, what is hate speech? As an exception to the freedom of expression, rather than hate speech having its own life that then becomes authoritarian and then muzzles free speech.
Yes. Senator, yes, I'd really like you to respond to that. Please go.
I want to clarify that this is not the first time this bill is coming before the Senate. I introduced this bill a year ago. And it is among the bills that suffered the ruling of the court. The Senate went to court and we said a lot of bills are pending. They are not being, they're supposed to have been signed into law, and some were signed into law, and some of these bills were pending consideration by the National Assembly. We had this tug of war between the National Assembly and Senate, and some of our bills were hanging not being processed while we were processing theirs until we went to court. So these are our introduction of this bill. So we are not rushing now because elections are here. No, we did it a year ago. We have reintroduced it because the court ruled that all those bills are nullified, and now we are introducing it. The other thing is, this bill is not just about hate speech. This is a comprehensive bill that tries to bring in a new structure altogether to deal with discrimination, to deal with hate speech, to deal with even discrimination when it comes to distribution of resources, equity, you know, all that. So it's and peace building and reconciliation. So it's an all-round bill, not just a hate speech bill. And so we are not like rushing because, by the way, we had stakeholders meetings before this bill went the second reading, and we will still have stakeholder engagement even with NCIC and all those that come in, inclusive my colleague here. Put in as much as you're able so that at the end of the day, can we come and get sober as a country on hate speech, on equity, on issues of discrimination. So it's an all-round bill that does not just deal specifically on hate speech.
Just before I go to Ms. Nyoto, do you expect that some of the things captured in this bill, that there will be enough time for it to be in motion ahead of before 2022 or even during that election? Is that the vision?
Yes, for me, there is this. I've told you it's not the first time it's coming. We already considered it, so a lot of submissions have come in. So it's just a matter of redoing it again in the manner that that the court had directed, that both houses come to concurrence on a certain bill before it can go for assent. So we can really process it. We did the first reading the other day. We are going in for second reading. What will stop it from being done? And if this is what will bring sobriety in this country on hate speech, on equal distribution of resources, on reconciliation, then we can speed it up for the sake of this country.
Omboy, let me bring you in right now. And Mugambe started by saying that, first, it is not your fault. It's not NCIC's fault. Their hands are tied. Mheshimiwa Pareno has mentioned that you're understaffed, underfinanced. Looking at everything that has been said here, and that we really are not getting it right, and especially as far as hate speech is concerned, I imagine we will dwell a lot on this because that is what takes center stage during our political moments. Your thoughts on Mugambe's submissions here?
Yeah, you know, I'm happy that there's someone who understands the situation that NCIC has been in. Number one, we have a law that really does not capture the whole scope of incitement to violence. It does not capture the whole scope of definitions of hate speech. It defines hate speech, you know, as hate speech. It's, you know, against ethnic lines. It does not define that maybe if a politician, you know, insults another politician, and maybe the people who follow or people who really believe in that politician feel that they have been, you know, discriminated against. But this particular bill, number one, introduces the issue of vilification, something that is not in our current bill. So that anyone who says unpleasant things against another person, you know, the previous bill just says against ethnic lines. But if you talk something against maybe another political party, you may really not have the legal standing, you know, and the case may not have the best in court. There is also the issue of, you know, punishment. Some of the crimes that have been put in the law do not. There is no definition of the punishment. That you know, the punishment is not defined. They do not say that you're going to jail for 7 years or for 10 years or for how many years. So these are the challenges that we have been facing. The issues of financing, we are now working very closely with the ministry so that they may support us to also open regional offices so that we can have our presence in all these other places. Also, you also know that the NCIC on itself cannot prosecute cases. We rely on the DPP, Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, to, you know, propel our cases and you know, get them to the end of justice. And we also rely on the DCI, who are seconded officers to our offices, to assist us in our investigations. some of these issues may not be simple because we are working across different departments that we have no control about. We are working with courts whose threshold in terms of evidence, admissibility of evidence, especially video evidence, is very, very high. When we take, for example, if KTN today projected a video of a politician inciting Kenyans against, against others, against, let's say, Kenyans of a different ethnic group, NCIC cannot use that particular video in court because I see Kenyans say that NCIC, we have seen someone, a politician on TV, insulting other Kenyans, inciting other Kenyans to violence. But NCIC is doing nothing about it. It's about admissibility of evidence and the threshold that is very, very high. So what are we doing about that? Number one, we are employing Kenyans to be available in all political rallies that are going to happen because we have a roadmap to the 2022 general election. And this roadmap include, having employees or investigators, sending them to different political rallies so that they may be able to collect the evidence themselves. Because the evidence that is collected, that is projected on television, has its own procedures that have to be followed. For example, the journalist who took that video must appear in court in person and, be a witness in the same. How many journalists would be willing to do that? How many Kenyans would be willing to do that? So indeed, it is true that there is incapacitation due to lesser funding, but we are working on it and the ministry is very supportive. We are hoping to get more people to be working with us, to increase the human resource in our offices so that we may bring sanity to Kenyan politics, so that we may punish, leaders who are going against our acts. And I think having established proper working relationships with the EACC, because now we are having the multi-agency approach, where we are having joint meetings with the EACC. Actually, on Thursday, we have a meeting with the EACC, where we are having different meetings with the Office of the ODPP, with the DCI, so that we can just forge a proper working relationship and try to hold our country together just before the 2022 general election. And we remember that NCIC was established after the 2007-2008 post-election violence. I'm sure no Kenyan would wish to find themselves in the situation that we saw ourselves in at that time. Blood was shed, people died, people lost their homes, people lost their livelihoods, just because leaders were not able to keep together. We want to promise Kenyans that this shall not happen again. We are in charge and we are there. And with the support of leaders like Senator Pareno, we are sure that we are going to make it, because without a proper law, the law is not...
I'm not sure you can get me. Unfortunately, we'll have to take a short break. I think she's struggling to hear me for a bit there. But she said a lot, and we'll have our panelists here react on some of the things she said. I want us to quickly take a short break. You're watching The Front Row. Remember, we're asking you whether you think Kenya is winning in its efforts to halt ethnic and class incitement, hate speech and discrimination. The hashtag is Front Row, at Akisa Wandera, at KTN News KE. We will be back with more. Stay with us.